Hillary, are you here? Give her a sec. Hillary, just checking that you're all set.
I am, Chair Foster. Thank you.
Great. Okay. We'll call to order the Green Mountain Care Board's hearing of September 15th. We have one agenda item. The notice of service reduction draft policy will be presented by Hillary Watson, and we have a potential vote noticed. So I'll turn it to Ms. Watson.
Great. Thank you. Let me pull up the slides here. Just one moment. All right. Wonderful. Are those on the screen for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you. All right. So we'll jump in. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to start the week with you all. Happy Monday. So we are here for our third presentation to the board outlining the interim notice of service reduction policy that we have been developing. So I want to just take a moment to express my gratitude for the thoughtful comments in last week's board meeting and the subsequent conversations and public comments over the past week. So we're very much looking forward to today's discussion. All right, so just a reminder on the agenda, these are the recent presentations that we have delivered to the board. And the first one was back in August, where we introduced this body of work. And then last week on the 8th, we reviewed a draft of the interim policy and posted that draft to the website for comment. And then here we are today to review the public comments that we received, changes that we made to the policy over the week. And as Chair Foster mentioned, if the board is ready, we do have motion language for a possible board vote. So this next slide, we've just been recycling to ensure that it's a part of each presentation. I don't think that we need to spend time here since we've reviewed the legislative language, a few times together now, but certainly happy to come back to this slide, if it could be helpful later on in discussion. All right, so jumping into the public comments, we received 2 public comments last week, one from the Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health Systems, and one from the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. So I just wanted to call out some shared feedback across the 2 comments and then highlight feedback specific to each of the organizations. So starting out, both VAWS and the HCA, expressed appreciation for our approach to drafting this interim policy and, our work to provide structure and clarity around, a legislative mandate that's already in place and our recognition, that we will need to learn and possibly modify over time. I very much got the sense from both of those comments that VAWS and the HCA, look forward to engaging in this learning together and evolving the process as needed. Both the HCA and VAWS also recognized that hospitals may have to make difficult decisions about which services to offer in the context of their budget, and the importance of not jeopardizing access to essential services as those decisions are being evaluated. Lastly, both comments express the need for this process to have a well-defined and limited timeline. So both organizations shared concerns about not creating an overly lengthy or burdensome process. VAWS also shared their view that a separate Act 68 goals analysis, as required in the posted draft policy that we reviewed last week, is out of legislative scope and could delay the process. They also shared, as they did in their public comment in the board meeting last week, that they recommend the use of the Oliver Wyman report to identify exemptions to the policy until another resource is released from the Agency of Human Services. Their last comments encouraged the board to add in language to limit the scope of service reduction or elimination and to reconsider the option of the full submission. So generally, their recommendation was really to center the policy around the notice process and streamline any required analysis. The HCA also requested a slight modification to the policy language. They wanted us to make it clear that they will receive all information produced in connection with a full submission, including access to confidential or proprietary materials, as is consistent with other regulatory work. So now I just move the slides forward here. Just wanted to walk folks through the changes that we made to the policy as we worked to incorporate feedback and prepare a more final version of the interim policy for a potential board vote today. So I added a link here. So the updated policy should be up on the website. Folks are welcome to find it under today's presentation materials. But just following along that document, we start with some changes made to the definitions section. So as discussed in the meeting last week, we clarified that it is patient education that would be an included service. We also introduced new language to set some additional parameters around reductions or eliminations. So these updates, many of them proposed by VAWS, include adding in the word indefinitely. So the definition now reads, reduction or elimination as defined as an intentional action with the potential to indefinitely decrease patient access to the service. And I will offer up just as a staff member here, I've struggled with this one a little bit. We chatted with the folks in Connecticut and, they've run into some challenges sort of defining time periods in this work. And so very much hear and appreciate VAWS's sentiment that we want to make sure that, these are, intentional actions, decisions made, and that it's, we're not capturing quick, changes that may be due to circumstances outside of the hospital's control. So I really welcome the board to dig into the word indefinitely and its inclusion in the definition, and we can think together about if that feels right. So we also added a 30-minute travel time threshold for the relocation or shifting of a service site. This is also to help avoid notices for, address changes within a very small geographic area. So, a site moving across the street, for example. And so, 30-minute travel time. We actually did change the language in the policy where it actually does say 30-minute travel time as opposed to drive time to ensure that, if folks are accessing public transportation, we're being mindful of the duration that somebody needs to be, moving from one site to the other to access that care. So I apologize that the slides actually don't have that updated language. Then, in an effort to address another clarifying question raised in last week's board meeting, we added in language to the bullet about clinical capacity. So it now reads, reducing the clinical capacity of a service in terms of operating hours or clinic sessions at any one location by 50% or more. And we refined the bullet again in response to board feedback last week about services provided by a hospital that are not sort of squarely managed or overseen by that hospital. So this now reads selling, transferring, outsourcing the ownership, oversight, or provision of a service or facility. And then we specified that only the selling or decommissioning of major equipment without replacement would qualify here. And then in the inpatient beds bullet, we changed some language here. So it now reads, any reduction in inpatient or observation beds or staffing changes that reduce inpatient or observation census or admissions. And then moving right along, that's what we did in the definitions section. And here we have some new guidance for the services exempt from the policy. So in discussions with the Agency of Human Services Office of Healthcare Reform last week, they requested that instead of building a public website that listed service reductions or eliminations exempt from the policy, which was written into the prior draft that we reviewed together last week, they are now requesting that hospitals should contact the Agency of Human Services Office of Healthcare Reform to determine if a proposed service reduction or elimination has been so identified. So in issuing this new guidance, we wanted to make it clear to hospitals that contacting the AHS Office of Healthcare Reform to explore exemption does not constitute a notice of intent per the requirements of this policy. So if a service reduction or elimination being proposed to comply with an established budget has not been so identified by AHS, then hospitals would need to provide notice per this policy. Next, we made a handful of changes to the notice requirements section. So first, in response to discussions in last week's board meeting, we removed the Medicaid specificity in the transition plan requirement to discuss provisions for preserving network adequacy. We added the Department of Financial Regulation in as a recipient of the notice so that they also may provide comment to the board. And then per HCA feedback, we clarified that all notice and submission materials would be shared. Lastly, in this section, we made the decision to remove the requirement that hospitals share how the proposed reduction or elimination is in line with the goals outlined in Act 68. So now hospitals are only required to discuss alignment with the CHNA or the statewide plan, when it's available. But again, that's not until 2028. And then the second part there is that the hospitals would speak to alignment with their mission and vision. Okay, so this is our last changes slide here. So in the notice evaluation and determination section, we removed the preliminary hearing language that was included in the prior draft of the policy. So with that removal, we also introduced key milestones along that 45-day timeline. So now we hope that it is clear how long each party has to issue kind of key communications, and the board has made a commitment to vote within 45 days of the receipt of a complete and accurate notice. So then lastly, we just cleaned the draft up a bit. We had some general edits. We corrected typo, streamlined the language, hopefully increased clarity and brevity in a few areas, and kind of polished and tightened things up for a more final draft. So that's the end of the changes that we made. And as I mentioned, that the new draft should be up on the website now, and folks are welcome to review that. And so we do have a next steps slide, just wanting to recognize that there were a few areas of the policy where there was, additional board discussion and feedback. But rather than, maybe a clear change, it was more along the lines of wanting to monitor certain sections over time to get a better sense of, how well these filters and processes are really facilitating the hospitals and board in carrying out this required work. So those areas, which I hope I have covered in the slide here, include that 50% threshold for reduction or elimination. I know there have been some concerns around whether or not that's the right percentage, and the right percentage for all hospitals. So we can certainly, talk a little bit about that if helpful. Board members and VAWS also shared a desire to revisit the reporting requirements over time, and ensure that the process is providing enough information to the board, yet is not overly or unnecessarily burdensome. Also, as mentioned last week, and it comes up in almost every discussion that I have with someone about the policy, we really need to continue to build collaboration and coordination across state agencies, so that we are aware of the full landscape, resources that are available in these situations and how all the pieces of this complex system are kind of working together. And lastly, this work has really highlighted the need for more comprehensive, timely data collection and reporting tools. We need to better understand access to care in Vermont. We need to be able to forecast access and anticipate and plan for the needs of our shifting population. So this policy, is really one additional tool that the state now has to ensure that we are prioritizing the services that Vermonters need, now and into the future. So that wraps up my presentation. We do have potential motion language included, but I can turn it back to you, Chair Foster, for any questions or discussion, or I'm not sure if you want me to bring the potential motion language up. I'll follow your lead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, why don't you put up the motion language?
Okay.
I'll move, then we can have discussion on the policy. I move to adopt the notice of service reduction interim policy as included in today's presentation.
I'll second.
The only major comment I had is that this will likely change as we experience notices and we go through the process. I do think the 50% threshold is too high for some hospitals for some service lines, so we may need to consider that as we go forward. I think the change that was made about the census helps address some of my concerns on that at this time. And I want to thank you for making that change. I have no other comments. I'll open up to the others.
I'll just jump in. I didn't have a lot. I really appreciated you incorporating the suggestions from the people who provided public comment. I thought it was helpful and important. And the one area that I still have some concerns about is the timeline, but I think, again, it's one of those things we'll experience it and then have a better idea of how it's working.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So thank you, Hillary. Your presentation was fantastic, and I also appreciate all the work that's gone into this and the adjustments that have been made after each presentation and hearing feedback. And I think we all agree this is going to be a work in progress that will evolve. I was just thinking as you were presenting about the word indefinitely in that line. And I think, the purpose of that intentional, can you pull up that slide for just a quick second that you had? Yeah, an intentional action with the potential to indefinitely decrease patient access to the service. I think, there's an important word there. It's intentional. That's a key word in that phrase. And I think it's true that we're not looking to evaluate and add administrative burden when, a hospital loses a provider and it's a short-term temporary reduction in a provider with their intent to resume that service once they replace that provider. But I hear your concern about the word indefinitely. And it sounds like you've had some conversations with Connecticut where word choice matters. And so I just wanted to say we could possibly, and again, I'm thinking about this on the fly, so I welcome other board comment. But we could modify indefinitely to say an intentional action with the potential to decrease patient access to the service in the medium, and then parentheses 2 to 3 years, or long-term parentheses more than 3 years. So that might capture, and again, this is me on the fly, but that may capture our intent and the spirit of the language, which is to say we recognize that some hospitals are going to have some temporary reductions in service as providers may potentially leave and they're going to replace that. We're really talking about, are you planning to reduce this service, even in the short run, even in the medium run, or definitely in the long run? So I'll throw that out there for comment or feedback, or maybe there's other suggestions out there.
I was actually going to bring up the similar topic, although I think of it slightly differently. I had concern that the term indefinitely could produce a scenario, say, for instance, where a hospital, in order to comply with the budget, significantly reduces inpatient capacity for that budgetary year with the intent of resuming that capacity later. And so I think when the intentional component and the indefinitely component I feel like we're managing intent and we're managing a vague time description. So I guess I was more comfortable with just eliminating the word indefinitely and also, but recognizing Chair Foster's comment that I think that there will be changes to this process over time. And if that captures too many things, then we could adjust that. I think the intention component, I think, manages Member Holmes's concerns about a provider leaving on their own without an intent to eliminate that service. But I do have concern that indefinitely has a lot of room for interpretation, and while one's intent may be to not reduce it indefinitely, it could lead to an indefinite reduction. And so anyways, I guess this is all in order to comply with the budget. So I think that I would probably be more comfortable with eliminating the word indefinitely there. Otherwise, my general comments is I do think overall this captures the requirements and intent of Act 68 very nicely, and I think you've done a lot of work on it. I appreciate it. I think there's some really helpful, reasonable exclusions from entering the policy, which is alignment with AHS's and interests in system transformation. And I would also just sort of add, I hope this policy is used very rarely, so that this is an uncommon occurrence.
And I will just share too, around the indefinitely conversation here, in VAS's public comment, they also recommended permanently decrease patient access. So that was also, thought about. And I think, each of these words can sort of get at different things. So just to add to the conversation that was their suggestion. And we decided indefinitely might capture sort of some of that spirit, but be a slight modification. So again, I really appreciate that we're thinking about this together.
Yeah, I do as well. And I think I appreciate everybody's understanding and commitment to this being an iterative process. I think the 50% may not be needed, may not make sense for all hospitals, given the differences in size. Like Member Merman said, I hope this is a rarely used safeguard. And what I've really come to hope is that this is a gateway to better collaboration between hospitals and regulators and state systems. That we see it as an opportunity to build out the data that we need on system performance statewide and create better alignment between community needs and local hospitals. And it leads to the decrease in the use of closures of service lines as threats or retaliation. I think this is an opportunity to improve our collaboration. I welcome that.
I'm going to take public comment, and then we can respond and think about how to address whether or not we want a different word or to strike indefinitely. I'll start with the healthcare advocate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members, and Hillary, great work. This was not easy. It's a pile of work based on some not completely thought out legislative language. And so I guess I just want to recognize that first. There are dynamics here that you're locked into due to what's on the page in the statute that I think are glaring and maybe warrant some attention. But that's not attention at this table. That's attention in the legislature. I also, just weighing in off the seat of my pants in this discussion that's going on now, I think I would side with Member Merman about removing the word indefinitely. And just appreciate the work and appreciate the recognition that we're going to need to keep looking at this and tinkering with it. So thank you.
Okay. And public comment via raise the hand. Okay, hearing none. It seemed to me as though a majority of the board preferred to strike the word indefinitely. That was my sense. So if someone would like to make a friendly amendment, I would accept it.
Chair Foster, I'd like to make a friendly amendment to your motion to strike the word indefinitely from the draft or from the final notice of service reduction interim policy.
I second and accept the friendly amendment. Hillary, could you put the policy back up, actually?
Do you want me to bring up the actual policy document?
No, I'm sorry. Maybe it was 2 slides ago. The one with the, here, okay. Okay, so the only change then would be, okay, and you can go to the motion language. Okay. I move to adopt the notice of service reduction interim policy as included in today's presentation while striking the word indefinitely from the definitions section.
I'll second.
Any other public comment at this time? All in favor, say aye. Oh, I'm sorry, hang on. There's a Devin Green. There's a hand raised. Devin?
Thank you. This is Devin Green, Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health Systems. This is moving rather quickly this morning, but I just wanted to urge this group to, again, we also hope that this is a rare occurrence and also that the process moves very quickly for hospitals to be in line with their budgets for the year. And so we will continue to push for that going forward as we figure out this process a bit more, and appreciate the work on this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Green, and thank you for Voz for spending the time with our staff. Excuse me, working on some of these edits, the suggestions. Many of them were taken. I thought they were really helpful. So thanks for your time. Any other public comment? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Aye. And the motion carries. Tremendous thanks to you, Ms. Watson and Ms. Barabee, for all your work. This was a lot of work really fast on a new issue that the state has not tackled with a new statute. So you did a great job, and we will iterate, I'm sure, but this was really great that we got this together. Thank you. We have nothing else on the agenda today. Is there any other old or new business for the board? Okay, hearing none, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 I
Aye.
Aye, and we're adjourned. Have a good day.